There's a story the media stopped telling you. A crisis that supposedly vanished when the winter of 2023 ended without mass blackouts. But right now, in 2024, Europe is living a quiet catastrophe, following an exact pattern of self-destruction, stage by stage, decision by decision, almost like it's reading from a script that leads to irreversible economic decline. In 2021, Europe was an industrial powerhouse, a global manufacturing hub built on affordable Russian energy. Its industries were competitive, its households were stable, its future seemed secure. Within 3 years, its industrial base is being dismantled, its competitiveness has been torched, and it's staring down a generation of stagnation. Not from war, but from a quiet, self-inflicted economic implosion. This isn't a temporary problem. This is structural damage. And here's what should terrify you. The crisis never ended. The media just stopped talking about it. We're not approaching the point of no return. We're already past it. This is the story of how an economic superpower dies, why it always thinks it's different, and why the math says the damage is permanent. And it's happening faster than anyone wants to admit. It all started with an illusion. The media narrative you were fed is that Europe weathered the storm. The winter of 2022-2023 passed, the lights stayed on, and the crisis was declared over. But this is a dangerous fantasy. The truth is, energy prices never returned to their pre-crisis levels. While American businesses and households benefit from stable, low-cost natural gas, Europe is now locked into a new reality, paying 3 to 4 times more for the exact same molecule of energy. The immediate panic may have subsided, but the high-cost poison is still coursing through the veins of the European economy, silently and relentlessly eroding its foundation. This isn't a recovery, it's a managed decline masquerading as stability. The headlines celebrated survival, but they ignored the crippling cost of that survival, a cost that is now hollowing out the continent from the inside. The official story is a lie of independence. European leaders proudly declare they have freed themselves from Russian gas, painting a picture of strategic victory and energy sovereignty. The reality is a shell game. Europe simply swapped one dependency for another, more expensive one. They are now desperately buying liquefied natural gas, LNG, on the volatile global market, primarily from the United States, at a massive premium. Filling gas storage reserves, a task that used to cost around $50 billion annually, now demands over $200 billion every single year. This isn't a one-time emergency cost, it's the new permanent reality. Europe is paying a fourfold independence tax that vaporizes capital, cripples industry, and funnels a river of wealth statoside. They haven't achieved energy security. They've merely rented it at a price that guarantees their own industrial demise. While politicians give speeches, deindustrialization is accelerating in the shadows. In Germany, the engine of Europe, the numbers are a quiet scream. Since 2021, industrial production has plummeted by a staggering 15%. This isn't a minor dip, it's a landslide. Giants of German industry, like the chemical titan BASF, are permanently shutting down entire plants that have operated for decades. Steel mills, unable to compete with energy costs 5 times higher than their American rivals, are packing up and relocating. This is a slow-motion bleed, a quiet hollowing out of the continent's productive capacity. Every day, more manufacturing jobs disappear, not with a bang, but with a quiet factory closure announcement. Europe isn't just losing market share. It's losing the very ability to produce, surrendering its industrial sovereignty piece by piece. To mask this bleeding from the public, governments have sprung a massive subsidy trap. Across the continent, more than $500 billion has been funneled into energy subsidies to shield households and businesses from the brutal reality of sky-high bills. This isn't a solution. It's a giant, unsustainable painkiller. It's a mountain of national debt being accumulated to hide a terminal diagnosis from the voters. This colossal spending starves a budget for everything else: infrastructure, innovation, defense, while creating a dangerous illusion of normalcy. The moment these subsidies are inevitably withdrawn, the full force of the economic tsunami will hit an unprepared public. The governments are borrowing from a future that may not exist to pay for a present that is already broken. The consequences of this new reality are an industrial exodus of historic proportions. The capital is not just slowing down, it's fleeing. BASF, a bedrock of German industry, is now redirecting its major new investments to China, chasing the affordable energy and predictable costs it can no longer find at home. In a move that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago, Volkswagen is publicly stating that for the first time in its history, it will prioritize plant closures in Germany over its other global locations. Companies large and small are stampeding toward the United States, drawn by the siren song of cheap energy and government incentives. This is not a cyclical downturn. It is a fundamental, one-way migration of Europe's manufacturing base. The factories that leave will not come back. The jobs that are lost are gone for good. The epicenter of this collapse is Germany. The former engine of Europe has sputtered to a halt, now threatening to become its anchor. The country officially entered a recession in 2023 and is forecasted to have zero growth in 2024. The sectors that form the very backbone of its Made in Germany brand are in freefall. Energy-intensive industries like chemicals, metals, glass, and paper have seen GDP production collapse by 25%, 30%, even 40%. These are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent an existential threat to the German economic model. A nation that built its prosperity on industrial excellence and affordable energy has now sabotaged both pillars of its success. As Germany falters, it risks dragging the entire Eurozone down with it into a spiral of stagnation and decline. This entire crisis has been supercharged by a green transition fantasy. The belief that intermittent renewables like wind and solar could seamlessly replace 24/7 baseload power from gas and nuclear was a catastrophic miscalculation. The laws of physics do not bend to ideology. The wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, meaning renewables require a constant, stable backup, a role traditionally filled by natural gas. Germany's decision to shut down its perfectly functional nuclear power plants at the height of the crisis was an act of economic self-harm, a decision that traded engineering reality for political dogma. They chose to make the crisis infinitely worse, driven by an ideology that ignored the fundamental requirements of a modern industrial economy. Despite a temporary sense of calm, Europe remains just one step away from another full-blown crisis. Gas storage facilities are filled each summer at exorbitant cost, but this provides only a thin buffer. One colder than average winter, one unexpected supply disruption from an LNG facility in the US or Qatar, or one geopolitical flare-up is all it would take to send prices skyrocketing and plunge the continent back into emergency mode. Europe's alternative pipeline suppliers, like Norway and Algeria, are already producing at maximum capacity. They cannot scale up to fill the void. There is no plan B. The system has been stripped of all redundancy, leaving 450 million people dependent on a fragile just-in-time global supply chain, praying that nothing else goes wrong. European Union officials and national politicians consistently downplay the severity of the situation, desperate to avoid admitting that their own policy failures are the root cause of the disaster. The media, once filled with dire warnings, has become a complicit partner in this silence, shifting its focus elsewhere and leaving the public dangerously uninformed. But the markets are not fooled. The bond markets are pricing in higher risk. The flow of capital tells the real story, as investors and corporations vote with their feet, quietly divesting from a continent they no longer see as a viable place for growth. The official narrative is one of control, but the flow of money is a vote of no confidence. Even if, by some miracle, energy prices were to normalize tomorrow, the structural damage is already done and is likely permanent. A decade of uncompetitive energy costs has been baked into the system, a death sentence for Europe's industrial competitiveness. The companies that have relocated their production chains to the US and Asia are not coming back. The skilled manufacturing talent that is now emigrating in search of opportunity will not return. Europe is now facing the prospect of a Japan-style lost decade, but with a crucial, terrifying difference. The decline is happening much, much faster. This isn't a cyclical downturn. It is a permanent, structural downgrade of an entire continent's economic potential, a self-inflicted wound from which it may never recover.